Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Peterson. Welcome to the Ministry Wives Podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. Here, we have honest conversations about the realities of the ministry wife life and how to keep our hearts tethered to Jesus as we serve Him. Today on this episode, I'm talking with Angie McClain. She is a certified financial planner with GuideStone, and we are talking about finances in the ministry family. I knew when we were going to dive into a season full of family life that we could not leave out talking about money. It is one of the major stressors in a marriage, and particularly in a ministry family when you feel like you're on a limited budget. How can you handle your money well and be good stewards and be thoughtful and teach your children? Well, we're going to dive into all those things in this episode. So join me, friends, in my conversation with Angie. Well, hi, Angie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. It's good to be here.
So glad you're here. And this season, we're focused on all things family life for the ministry wife. And I just knew that I wanted to have a conversation about money and finances.
Yes.
Because don't you think that money is one of the major stressors in marriage? Have you found that to be true?
It is. It's a major stressor in many aspects of life. And it's something that influences our lives, our everyday lives. And it's important to make sure that we're comfortable having the conversation, but also we have practical steps on what to do with money because it can be quite intimidating.
That is so true. I think that those are all the anchor points that we're going to hit in this conversation. And my heart is that those who are listening will learn about some resources that are available to them. And then also, ministry wife, that you'll just be encouraged about how to be content on whatever budget you have and learn some strategies about how to handle it and be a good steward of it. So, Angie, I'm just so glad that you're a part of this conversation. Now, let's just dive into a little bit about you. You work at GuideStone, which is an entity of the Southern Baptist Convention. And I always love to partner with organizations in the SBC who supports ministry families in specific ways. So let's start at the bottom line. Angie, could you fill us in on what is GuideStone and what does it offer ministry families?
Absolutely. GuideStone, like you said, it makes up a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and we have 20 billion in assets over management, and we are the largest Christian screened fund company in the nation. And so our heart really is to allow morals and investments to align so investors don't have to sacrifice that to invest well. We have a very rich history. We've been around for over 100 years. Dr. Lunsford in 1918, he saw that pastors and pastors' widows were retiring below the poverty line. And so he set up a trust fund to support them and give them dignity. And a very rich part of our history is that Rockefeller, he gave $1 million grant. Rockefeller Jr.,
Oh,
his
wow.
son, gave another grant to support us. So that is in our bones, in our DNA. And we have evolved over the years to not just give assistance, but we encourage pastors, every Christian investor, and employers to save well. And so with education, managed account, that's the team that I work on, our wealth management team. We try to encourage, whether you have a lot or a little, to save well, invest well, and just something that I love to share here at GuideStone, that trust fund that started in 1918. Last year, it paid out over 11 millions to ministers and ministers' widows that were still,
Oh,
unfortunately,
man.
retiring below the poverty line. Sometimes here in the U.S., we think everyone has enough, but that's not the case. And we still keep that in our heart to support and give dignity.
Man, I am so grateful for the history of what GuideStone, how GuideStone has been, what it has been, and how long it's
Mm-hmm.
been around, as well as it initially starting with meeting a need. and then
Yes,
the generosity of others who have come alongside. And as we steward our money well, those gifts can continue to be generous for generations.
that's right.
And I just am so grateful for those of you who had heard of GuideStone but didn't really know what it provided and offered. I hope that you will become more familiar with the opportunities that are available to you, explore it a little bit more after our conversation, and see how best you can use the resources here to help you steward your money well and be faithful to the Lord with what you have. But Angie, let's kind of dive into who you are,
Sure.
and I would love to know how God led you to GuideStone and actually what you do there.
Yes, just like everyone listening, you can look back and see God's hand in your story. And looking back, I went to Dallas Baptist University, and I thought that my career would be in management information systems and computers, solely from the fact that my cousin, who lived in Houston, went to University of Houston. He's about 7 years older than me. He graduated and started making six figures working at NASA. So when I went to college, I thought, well, you go to college to make money, so I guess I'll just go on his career path. Well, little did I know that's not what God wanted for me. And that's also the beauty of Christian universities. There's so many mentors. And I remember I was in the library, probably looking gloomy because I don't like coding and programming and things. Ironically, my husband is a programming engineer, but God led me to him through DBU as well. But
Mm,
at the end of the day, this professor took me aside and took the time to help me understand what my gifts were and my
mm,
passions. And then I took several aptitude tests that were subsidized by the university, and come to find out, I was destined to be on the path of finance. During that same time, my grandparents' estate planning attorney was generous enough to allow me to come to one of their meetings. And I told her a little bit about what I wanted to do with my career. And she said, you either need to be an estate planning attorney and go to law school, or you need to become a CFP, a certified financial planner. And so, fast forward, after I graduated from graduate school with a financial degree and a degree in negotiations, I was ready to go to law school. I had taken the LSAT. I was ready to go. I was thinking of going and becoming an estate planning attorney. And that's when my roommate, she said, you have to go interview for a position at GuideStone. She worked there and she said it was an incredible company. So ironically, I came to GuideStone for interview practice, and that's when God interceded. And when I was in the room and they shared the vision, it just, you want to have meaning in life, and you want to, especially if your career can align with that. And they told me about it. But in that meeting room, they gave me an offer and said, we will pay for your CFP. And that was the other path. The light bulb went on that the attorney had said that I should go on. And so I started working at GuideStone it's about 17 years ago. And I work now with our wealth management team. We give advice. Actually, at GuideStone, we give advice to any of our clients, whether
mm,
you want us to help you with beginning stages of saving. We give complimentary advice to all clients. We have managed accounts if you want someone to have discretionary trading over your portfolio, because you don't want to, you don't want to do it and have peace of mind. And then if you've saved well, we have a wealth management team to help you, like you said, become good stewards of what God has given you. So we are nonprofit, so we try to keep those costs very low, and we truly have a heart to support you and your finances. And that's what I do. I work with our wealth management team on investments and strategic needs when it comes to financial planning.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I
Mhm.
just love how all of us have similar journeys where we
Yes.
think we're going one way, and whether the Lord intercepts that with a conversation with somebody or just an encounter with a topic. He just is so creative in the ways
Yes.
that he meanders us. And it usually is never a direct path. At least it's not been for me. And sometimes I go, God, you are so creative for
Mhm.
leading me here from where I thought I was going to go. And that's exampled in your story too, Angie. I just love how you're leveraging your education and your giftedness for the work of the Lord as you serve
Yes.
others who are serving him.
It shows that he cares, it shows that he's there, and then it's a promise in the Bible, and, I am not, able to reference the exact, passage, but it talks about if we follow him and if we
Mm,
listen to him, he will make our lives better than we can ever
mm.
expect. And I thought law school would be better than I could ever expect, but this is what he had for me and it's been great. And he has a plan for everyone that's amazing and better.
Exactly. And we can both say testament to that because of where we're at in our lives now. But if you're in the middle of this scratching your head moment and you're listening to this going, Lord, what are you doing with me? Just keep
Mhm.
being faithful and obeying him step by step. And he will direct your steps in the direction that he has created you to be. And I think that's a huge encouragement for us today. That's not even talking about money.
It is, yeah, he can see around corners. He's there.
That's so right. And I am grateful too because money is not something, especially for me, that I am natural at being wise about. And I
Mhm.
think most of us with our sin nature can quickly twist it to serve us rather than us seeing it as a way to serve the Lord and to be wise in it. And so I'm just curious of what you have experienced and known from your personal life as well as working with clients. But as you interact with families, what are some of the common struggles or tension points that you see in families about money?
I would say that there are a lot because money and investments are very taboo to talk about, and and even within a family. And also, some people are interested, some are not. Just like my husband, he's a programmer. He's not
Mhm.
interested in money, and I have to talk about his dreams and goals in retirement versus here's the investments and here are the dollar figures. And so I think when it comes to money in general, that's why I have a MBA in conflict management resolution. And the reason why is because and my undergrad is in finance, there's so much conflict when it comes to money. But I
Mm,
think that if you talk about it and if you can find creative ways to talk about it, that's the first step. Even when I meet with clients, usually there is one person that handles the finances, but in all of our financial planning meetings, I like both spouses to be there
mm,
just because both can be on the same page. And then it's fine if one handles the day to day, but both can be on the same page. Both can know who to trust if there's an emergency, because you would not believe if a catastrophic event happens and one person is left to deal with finances. So many people come out of the woodwork, but just knowing who you can trust and also knowing big picture is so helpful. And so I would just say when it comes to women, the research is so interesting because 90% of females will handle finances alone in their lifetime.
wow.
Also, in the year 2035, studies show that females will hold over 65% of US wealth. And that comes from a lot of different factors, but people or females in the workspace and a lot of many different reasons provide that statistic. Forbes magazine actually calls it the great wealth transfer, and other financial institutions have coined it different things. But at the end of the day, women do live longer than men.
Mm,
So if you're listening, that is showing the importance of us as women to know more about money, our money, how it affects our lives, and how to deal with it if we were left in that situation. But on the flip side, money can be very intimidating and difficult
Mhm.
to just dive in, especially as women, because our brains just connect everything. So we can get overwhelmed. But the good side of the research that I love says that women actually make really good investors. So that's why we all have to just elevate each other
Mhm.
and start taking those steps to say, I can do it. And this is not as hard as I think it is. And have a financial institution and friends that you can trust to start having the conversation.
I don't know about you, but in our marriage, my husband handles, I mean, it's not the same with you because you handle
Hmm.
the money, but I want to know some of those questions that you lead in to kind of gain his interest to have a conversation when automatically he may just kind of tune out whenever finances come on. So I want to come back to that for a minute. But I my husband deals with finances. It's interesting when you come into a marriage, and this happens in all marriages, not only ministry families. You come from different backgrounds
Hmm.
of needs, of levels of economic freedom or dependency,
Hmm.
of just how your family of origin handled and thought of and worked with money. And so when you come into a marriage, you both are bringing that to the table.
Right.
And we had so many conversations, intense conversations early on about how we even thought about money and how do we communicate with money. And there was a lot of conflict there. So after being married for 25 years, we have a trust and an understanding that have been well worked for of meeting in the middle of
Yes.
where our how we're going to handle money. And I have learned to value things that he values, and he has
Hmm.
learned to let go of things that I anticipate when we have cash in hand. And so, but I think the one thing that you said that is so key, I mean, you said a lot of great things, but the one thing that really resonated with me was about communication.
Right.
Being able to communicate with particularly your spouse in a ministry family about money. So, pulling back to the questions that you ask your husband for engagement and thinking about that scenario, what are some ways that we can bring up the conversation of finances in our marriage?
Mhm.
Do you have any like go-to sentences or questions or phrases?
Yeah, the when you talked about compromise, that's big because marriage in general, when you get married, you're stepping off your throne, he's stepping off his throne, and you're putting God up there to lead your
Mhm,
marriage, and then it's about compromise. And so I'll tell you this, Sean doesn't like to spend money, my husband,
mhm,
and I am really great at the planning and the big picture, but he's more practical than I am with the day-to-day budget. So it's knowing your strengths in the marriage and then also having a plan so you can hold each other accountable.
mhm.
Because I can guarantee if I was at the store and Sean said, you don't, don't buy that, that might be a little upsetting. But if
Yeah.
we had, if we had already discussed our goals
Mhm,
and dreams, and so just kind of taking it back a few steps, we try to do that. Where do we want to be in 10 years? What do we want retirement to look like? How does God and tithing fit into all of this? So if we can start to dream together and then talk about our values and morals, then you can kind of back into the conversation of money and we can talk about, well, how do we fill those buckets with what we do have, whether we have a
mhm,
lot or a little. You have to start somewhere. And
mhm,
so then we can compromise and come up with our family goals. And then we can say, all right, well, this is what we would like to tithe. This is what we would like to spend on a month to month basis. This is what we would like to save. And at that point is when the conversation just gets so rich and healthy, because then when we're at the store and Sean's like, do you really want to buy that? I can remember, well, yeah, we want to travel a lot in retirement. So it's, a lot of times with money, it's the discipline. A lot of us know
Mhm.
what to do. It's just the discipline to do it. And you have to say no to spending more than you say yes. And so then, after you've already dreamed, you've connected, you have your goals, then it's a lot easier for the discipline to come into play.
Ooh, that's the word, discipline.
Hmm.
Because there is something emotional about buying something. And with the ease of Amazon, I mean, there's been seasons where my husband's like, okay, what's coming today on our doorstep?
Me too.
But
Me too.
there's just something about that emotionally makes me happy with buying. And many of us
Hmm.
call it retail therapy, but some of it is just a indulgence of I want what I want and I'm going to get it now. And that's not discipline. And so I have to fight that. I have to fight that discipline of spending all the time, more so than my husband. And I love that you said we have to know our strengths and weaknesses, because in a marriage, it is so easy, especially with money, if we're different from each other, to shame the other for not being like us.
Yes.
But if instead we would kind of prize each other's differences as a pieces of a puzzle that fit together, and if we can
Hmm.
cooperate and work together, that has been so much more of a healthy and holistic understanding, because none of us are 100% right.
Correct.
And so if we can have the partnership with our spouse in the management of money, setting goals, where do we want to be? How are we going to structure this and move forward on that communicated plan? I think that would eliminate so many conflicts within
It
the marriage.
does, and you can hold each other accountable without having unhealthy conflict as well, and believing in each other, and like you said, seeing the best in each other, but recognizing you're not perfect in this area, as well. And I think it also matriculates down to the rest of your family, because something that surprised me when I first started researching kids and investing in money, that kids find their financial pulse between the ages of 8 and 12. So if we're not
What?
taught, yes, it's so
8
early.
and 12.
Yes, I have
Oh,
2 girls,
wow.
Jade and Piper, and when I read that, I remember one of them was in kindergarten, and I even, as a financial advisor and living and breathing all of this, I felt behind. And, if you're listening, don't feel behind. It's never too late to talk about all of this, but I would say it's just so early, and it's those simple things, like
Mhm.
when you go to the store and you're checking out with your kids, all of the marketing is right there. So there's the things you can grab and you can get at the last minute. But, mom, I want this, I want that. And you don't think anything of it. But if you can start coaching them, well, we're not going to get this. We have the money, but we're just not going to spend it right now. Guess what? When they get their first credit card in college, they might be less likely to just get it now and swipe, because when you're at the store, wherever you are, and countering things that cost money, you will have coached them. It's just those little things that you can do. But on the flip side, this one always makes me laugh. Studies show, and different polls show, that parents would rather talk about the birds and the bees than money with their
That is so
kids.
funny.
Yes. And so it just shows that it's still a little bit hard
Yeah,
for us to
it
talk about. But
is.
I think I would say, just if you have young kids at the house, or any, any kids that are still living in the house, just break it down this way. And this is where we started. There are 4 things that you can do with money. You can save, you can spend, you can give, and you can invest. And so that simplifies it. It doesn't make it so complex.
Mhm.
And even with Jade and Piper, we would, when they got a birthday gift that was money from grandparents, we would break it down into fives and ones and tens, and we would put it in front of them, and we would say, okay, God asked us to tithe 10%. and they would put in an envelope their 10% tithe. And then we would talk about, how much do you want to save? How much do you want to
Mm.
spend? And then we had a spend and save envelope. So we started doing that.
Mm.
And so then when it came to investing, they had money saved and they were able to open an investment account, which is the harder conversation. But
Wow.
we would just drive in the car and we would go past different stores or talk about different retail or different products that people were really into. So one would be, we have several friends that are nurses and they started wearing Crocs, and a lot of their nurse friends started wearing Crocs. And so I would tell them, if you see a product that people really want and are using a lot, that's a sign. Investing doesn't have to be too hard. It's just, whatever is
Mm.
popular. And then you go and look at the company. And if the company is doing well, and we kind of, there's a book, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it talks about people either eat at McDonald's or they invest in McDonald's and make money from it. So just kind of telling them, helping them be aware that you can invest. And I'll never forget my younger daughter. She was probably just 10 years old. She was at the time. She goes, "Oh, mom, you always say that when you walk in Costco, you just need one thing and then you come out with so much. You can't walk in and get just that one thing. I'm going to invest in Costco." She got it. It was so simple. And so that's how we
Wow.
started their investment account with those, though they got to decide. And I coached them, of course, and helped them to make sure that the companies were,
Mhm.
financially solvent and things like that. But I would just say, it's an easier conversation. If we can simplify it for our kids, it will
Mhm.
return exponentially for their
Mhm.
future.
That's really helpful. Thinking about early on beginning to layer healthy and biblical principles about those four categories that you talked about: invest, save, spend, and tithe. Are
Mhm.
those the four?
Give. Mhm.
Invest, save,
Save,
spend,
spend,
and tithe.
and give.
And
Yeah.
so that's not only for your kids, but it's also for you. Those are the four categories. Now, with your kids, I love that conversation about teaching them about those things that are in high demand. Those are the things you can think about investing in. And then for saving, what's kind of a practical conversation that you can have with them? And what does that sound like with saving with your kids?
We usually talk about short-term and long-term saving. So,
Mhm.
um, we talk about emergencies can happen. You should save in the short term, and then longer term saving is money that you could eventually invest. And so we let them break it down for us because I want them to have control of their finances. It's not my
Mhm.
plan, it's their plan. So I usually, but it's also neat when you let them do that, because one of my daughters is a saver, one is a spender, and we already know that, since they can break those down. And so then you can coach to that, since you know
Mm.
what their natural tendencies might be. But I love when we let them, we it is mandatory that they tithe the 10%, and we show them in scripture where that is something that God asks our heart to do. But
Mm.
I love it at times they will give more. And it's such a blessing to see that they
Mm.
know not only that God asks us to tithe, but it's neat when you start to have this
Mm.
conversation with your kids, just to see the maturity and God just working on their hearts from a very early age. But even backing up and talking about us adults, there's a
Yes.
very simple formula that you can use when it comes to the amount you need to save. And think of this, it's a 50/20/30 rule. And
Okay.
so if you're listening and you just think, "Gosh, where do I start? I have income, but I want my money to work for me. I want a little bit of influence into my finances and having a plan." Think about every dollar that you earn that comes into your bank, dividing it up in 50/20/30. 50% would be going towards your fixed expenses. So the things that day to day, you just have to spend your mortgage payment, your property taxes, utilities, groceries, and things like that. So 50% of your income should go to those things. And then the 20% would be short term and long term savings. So your goal of your money coming into the bank is carving out every dollar that comes in into 20% saving for short term and long term. That would be short term and then retirement. And then 30% can be your discretionary expenses, your fun money. And so that's just a good formula that would give you some financial balance as you move forward. Now, I know there's some savers that are listening. So if you want to, if you're really wanting to save more and sacrifice, because a lot of times these things and saving more, it does require sacrifice, flip the 20 and 30. So then you would save 30 and you would spend on your fun money the 20%. So that's just a practical tip for budgeting that really can go a long way.
So many of us don't know where to start, and that gives us a good starting spot.
Right.
And so I think the beginning conversation could be with you and your husband, listener, sitting down, looking at your month to month take home and percentaging out these exact things and see how that would align. Would those be the next steps that you would suggest, Angie, for the ministry wife
Yes.
who's listening?
Yes, those are the next steps, but I also want to encourage, if I don't think it matters if you make a lot or make a little. It's just starting somewhere. And of that savings component, just trying to automate everything. And so when I work, what, the clients that I work with specifically now, they are transitioning into retirement and we're managing their portfolio during retirement years. And I'm always shocked because it's not always the high income earners that have a lot of money. It's those who just had, like we were talking about, the discipline to start early and save consistently. And then I think it was Albert Einstein said that the compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world, because if you can invest it early, then that money can work for you many years over and over. And so if you're listening and thinking, gosh, I really don't have that much money and this is all overwhelming, just start somewhere. Even if it's $10 a month, start saving it. So you have the 50/20/30 rule. Automate, start saving something. The next thing is you do want an emergency fund. And so you don't want every time a financial emergency comes up to have to put it on a credit card and then you're in a deeper financial crisis. And so rule of thumb is the first step is saving about $1,000 a month in an emergency fund. That's your short-term savings goal, but then eventually you want to work up to 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a savings account. But after that, then you get to invest the excess, and then of course you want to be saving for retirement as well. But my best advice is just automate it all so it just goes out of your bank, you never see it.
And that's what automate means, right? You set up those things that just pull it from your bank to
Yes.
pay for to pull into your savings without even thinking
Yes.
about it.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
And yeah, I was like, automate. I think I know what that means, but maybe I don't. But yes, to set it up so that the computer can do it.
Right.
So then, as far as tithing, what would you suggest? So we have the 50/20/30, and I'm assuming your suggestion would be just with off the top before you start breaking down the percentages. You take the 10%, or how do you explain tithing with what you get from month to month?
Yeah, that is a good question, a very common question that we get. For me, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but for me personally, we sacrifice so we can tithe. And so I take it out of the 30% because that's our fun money. And so I think that we are called to sacrifice so we can tithe, and it would come from the 30%.
That's really good. That's really helpful. So think about that as you're listening, 50/20/30, and what your next steps could be as you look at your finances. And I just tell you from personal experience, I often don't want to even know these things because ignorance is sometimes bliss
It
until you
is.
get stuck under a rock and
Right.
you're in a mess. It's worth it to do the hard thing. It's worth it to have the hard conversation because you are preparing for not the now, but for the later, for the future, whether it be your future year, next year, or your next month, or when you retire. There is a value of sacrifice, there's a value to discipline when we're able to let go of something that we can get right now for the hope and the promise of later.
Yes. Yes.
So we encourage you to do that. Are there any other practical tips and ways that you could suggest for families to handle financial decisions wisely?
Yeah, I would say that from a spiritual perspective, God has wrecked my heart a few times early on because our comfort comes from Him
Mm,
and not in money. And it can get really easy to find our comfort in those little buckets that we're building up. And so just keeping the spiritual perspective in it all. And I remember in the beginning of my career before kids, I had our whole financial plan and retirement goals and all of that outlined, and just that tiny voice that is the Holy Spirit, and you listen to it. He said, "Well, where am I in this financial plan?" And just making
mm,
sure that through the ups and the downs, because you will have financial ups and downs, that you just remember to go to the Lord, and that's
mm,
where our financial comfort is. But He also asks us to be good stewards of the money that we have, and just balancing that.
That's so good. Comfort. I do feel comforted when I have all my needs met.
Right.
And then that lulls me into a dependency on it.
Yes.
And I also would agree that there's been seasons and the Lord asked me, where am I in this? What scripture, is there a scripture that you have clung to keep you rooted in the truth?
I brought my Bible today because there was a scripture that I wanted to share.
Mhm.
It I think the whole verse is worth reading, but a lot of us are familiar. It's the Proverbs 31 woman, and it just talks about who we should be as Christians. But I just wanted to read it because it encourages me, and it also hopefully can encourage all of everyone listening, that you can make good investors and good financial decisions. And studies show it, I'm saying it, but even in the Bible, on verse 16 of Proverbs 31, it says, "She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night." So I just love how that correlates with all of this. And I would say that just let us know how GuideStone can support you in the future, whether you're just starting out. We have a customer relations team Monday through Friday. Anyone can invest with GuideStone. You don't have to be a part of SBC or a employer sponsored plan. We want you to know that we are here to support anyone who wants to be good stewards and align morals with Christian investing. And if you just wanted to open an investment account or an IRA or anything, customer relations on our toll free line can support that. Or if you're listening and you have saved well, and you're perhaps getting closer to retirement, I really think that you should work with a financial planner about 10 years before retirement, because then you can build a financial plan. But if there are gaps, you have some time to address that, and it's not right before you retire. And
Mhm.
so, if you're listening and you're in that season of life, we have a wealth management team, and we're here to support you. Or if you have an inheritance or sold land and you have funds and you just want to give them more growth opportunity than perhaps the bank rate is offering, and you want to invest, we do have our wealth management team, and we're happy to support as well. And if you're listening and you just need financial assistance, call customer relations and let us know. And if you're a pastor's wife or widow, and that's the season that you're in, we're here to help in any season of life.
I am so grateful for GuideStone and the resources that we have available that some may not know of. And if you just need to ask some questions and try to wrap your head around this, ministry wife who's listening, call the customer care line
Hmm.
and be able just to gather information, especially if you are absolutely in the dark about what to do next. They are there to help, and we all are aligned with our pursuit of glorifying the Lord and loving Him with our resources. Well, thank you, Angie, so much for joining me in this conversation and for sharing your story with us today. And I'm just glad that we were able to have this conversation about money.
Yes, it was a joy. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad that you're having these conversations. It's just so important.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ministry Wives podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. If this conversation was helpful to you, please share it with a ministry wife friend. Also, you can subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to make this content easier for others to find. And you can find this podcast and other helpful resources at ministrywivespodcast.com.